tonight was just so heartbreaking for the Detroit Red Wings. I cannot get over how things played out. As we discussed in yesterday's video, tonight had the potential to decide the Eastern Conference playoff teams, and it did. I'm not going to recap everything, but essentially Detroit needed to win to stay in it. The Flyers, if they wanted a chance, needed to beat Washington in regulation, and Washington simply needed a win of any type to secure their playoff spot. Making things more dramatic was the fact that Detroit and Montreal and Washington and Philly both ended within 5 minutes of each other. I was going back and forth, mostly watching the Washington-Philly game because it determined everything else. Honestly, a pretty boring matchup. Philly was down 1-0. They tied it. Again, they needed that regulation win. So with 3 minutes left, they pull their goalie in. Just put a pin in that. We'll come back to it. Detroit, on the other hand, had an incredible comeback, almost identical to what they did last night. Pretty poor, low-effort play in the first 2 periods. Saw them go down 3-1. They'd make it 3-2 before the beginning of the third. Then Daniel Sprong's super high-effort play ends up getting an ugly one, but only after forechecking his sack off. That would tie it 3-3. However, the Canadiens, hoping to play spoiler, would actually take the lead late in the third. And I mean, you gotta feel great watching this as a Canadiens fan because it was Slavkovsky from Hudson. This is the future. It was Hudson's first game last time. You guys are kind of angry I didn't talk about that. Here, he makes NHL players look silly, dancing Cale Makar style on the blue line. You love to see it. Anyway, like 10 seconds left in the game, the Red Wings get a very fortunate icing call, I'll call it that. Keeps the game alive, and David Perron ties it, and obviously the team goes completely wild. This is basically the same crew that was out there on the tying goal last night, and at this point, Philadelphia is essentially eliminated from the playoffs because even if they win their game in regulation against Washington, they'll lose out. Detroit would have at minimum 90 points. They would have 89. However, and let's jump back to that game, apparently Torts either didn't get the message or didn't care because almost right after that happened and Philly's fate was sealed, he pulls the goalie to try to get that regulation win. But Washington scores, they go up 2-1, and that would be the final score despite some good late game pressure. Now back to Detroit. They fulfill their end of the bargain, winning the game in the shootout, despite having to kill off a penalty in overtime. And I mean, it was perfect. Patty Kane is the 6th shooter, scoring the only goal of the shootout, but again, it didn't matter. What's extra frustrating, however, is that there were a couple of missed calls, or really just bad calls in that Washington Flyers game, and one in particular was egregious. About 10 minutes in the first, Kelly Sutherland, and really everyone on the ice, loses track of the puck. They assume the goalie has it. Really, it's in the air. It comes down, bounces in off Joel Farabee. This should have been a goal. However, Kelly Sutherland blew the whistle. On review, I mean, it was the right call. When the whistle is blown, the play is dead. However, this was a major screw up by Kelly Sutherland. It literally affected the fate of 3 teams. This would have given the Flyers an early lead. It's an unacceptable call. It really is. I understand it. Everyone lost sight of the puck, but it stinks. Near the end of the game, also a missed too many men penalty on Washington at a crucial moment. Like everyone was watching this game. Again, multiple seasons on the line, just not really acceptable officiating, unfortunately. But that's all I've got. Congratulations, Washington. You will now be playing my New York Rangers. I've got to say, I don't want to jinx things as just a general hockey fan. I wanted to see either Pittsburgh or Detroit in the playoffs. As a Rangers fan, however, I think Washington is at least less dangerous than the Penguins, probably Detroit as well. But it's the playoffs. Washington could beat New York. They could sweep them. It's the playoffs. Let's see how it goes. And still watching that Toronto game as Matthews is on 70 watch, and I don't think he wants to play the final game of the season against Tampa.